Okay, our last chapter here, chapter 15, where we're talking about price. And this is the final component of the 4Ps that we've been discussing. So we spent a lot of time talking about the product, value, adding value to customer, figuring out what customers want, all that element, and figuring out what product we're going to offer. We talked about the place, where we talked about distribution and retail versus online, and different types of retailers and wholesalers and all that type of thing. That's the place. And then we talked about promotion in the last few chapters, where we talked about advertising and public relations and sales promotions and all those types of things. And so then that brings us here to price, the last one. And again, I think it's really important to remember that all four of these need to go together to have an integrated marketing plan, so that if you used high quality components and you sell it in exclusive distribution and you promote it as a really high quality thing, then the price needs to reflect that as well. And the same thing, the opposite with the value. If I cut down all the frills and have extensive distribution and promote it everywhere and promote it as a good value, and that's the message I'm sending in the promotions, the communications, then I need to price it accordingly. So we just kind of have to make sure that all 4Ps go together, and that our entire thing is integrated, which is why it all has to be planned at the beginning, so that all four of these fit together. So the pricing framework, we've got a variety of goals that we might have. A firm might have a specific return on investment that they have to make. Sometimes you have that, especially if you've got stockholders and they require a certain return. And so you'll look at how this, for instance, how this product or how this marketing campaign or whatever is going to affect that. But we're only going to consider products that we think will return at least a specific return on investment. In general, your goal is to maximize profits. Now, sometimes I think marketers feel their goal is to maximize sales revenue or market share. So this would be sales in number, and this would be sales in dollars. And sometimes I think marketers feel that's their goal, is just to sell as many as possible. But really, marketing is a part of a bigger company, and so the goal should always be to maximize profits, to help the company's profits increase. And so if you take your sales minus your expenses, that equals your profit. And so that's something that we need to consider, right? Increasing sales, if it's increasing the expenses even more, is not going to help your bottom line. If you put out the Super Bowl ad and it increased sales by $1 million, was that a success? Well, not if it cost you $3 million to do it. So, it's really, the profit really should be the key here. Some people, though, just kind of, when they're talking about pricing decisions, are just trying to meet the competitors. And again, that kind of depends on the type of market you're in. But that's another type of goal that you'll see. We are faced with this constraint right here in pricing. So we have to price it at least at what it costs us, right? We have to at least cover our costs, or we're going to lose money. On the other, so that's kind of our minimum bound. Our maximum bound, though, is up here. So this is the floor, and this is the ceiling. Customers aren't going to pay more than they think it's worth. So we have to find something in between there. And that's what we're going to do. And so let's talk about the things that we have to consider other than what it costs us and what the customers are willing to pay, the max they're willing to pay. Let's talk about costs first. All the costs have to be taken in. So the product development, even before it got produced, the testing, the packaging, the distribution. Do I have a store? Do I sell it online? How much I'm going to promote it? All these things are going to factor into the price. And where we are in the product life cycle can change this too, because we talked about at different stages of the product life cycle. We have to promote more heavily, or maybe increase the distribution. So when we talk about product costs, it's not just, the key components that go into it, but it's really all of these things that need to be reflected in the price. we really, in order to set our price, we have to understand our costs. We have to know exactly how much it costs us to produce our product or provide our service. You know, this would apply to service as well, in order to know how to price it. And we were, in my accounting class, we just spent a good bit of time talking about this type of thing. So if you've had accounting, you've probably had this too. But we really have to have a good, and if you don't understand your cost that well, but your competitors do, they're going to have a big advantage over you in terms of pricing and knowing what they can do with their pricing. So a fixed cost is not something that never changes. It does not change with production. So a variable cost varies in direct proportion to the volume, how many products I'm producing or how many haircuts I'm providing or whatever. But there's a direct correlation here. If my volume goes up 10%, this cost will go up 10%. And so that's what these are. Everything else is really a fixed cost. So it could be, so these would be like your direct materials, your ingredients, hourly employees, those types of things, direct labor, I'll put that. These would be everything else. So it could be things that really do not change from month to month, like your rent or your mortgage or your insurance or something like that. But advertising comes in here too. And the advertising can change every single month as you change your mind, but it's not changing because your volume changed. In fact, it should be the other way around, right? And so fixed costs do not change with a change in the production level, and variable costs do. And everything has to fit. There's some costs that are kind of both, but you can split them into their fixed part and their variable part. Once you understand your costs in terms of whether they're fixed or variable, you can get the break-even point. And so the break-even point is your total fixed costs divided by your unit contribution margin is what we call the contribution per unit, which is the selling price per unit minus the variable cost per unit. So you have to understand how much of your costs are fixed and how much of your costs are variable in order to get this. But once you get this, and again, we spend a whole chapter on this in accounting, it's a really powerful tool. The break-even point tells you how many you have to sell just to cover your fixed costs. Everything after that, this entire contribution part is your profit, essentially, your income. And so while break-even isn't our goal, it's really important for us to know what that point is, and then everything after that is profit. So it's a very important thing to know, even though that's not our goal. You can show it on a graph like this, for instance. So the orange line here is my revenue, and the green line is my cost. And so you can see right here, whether I produce 0 or 6, I've got at least, even if I produce nothing, I've got at least $6 million in costs. So those are my fixed costs right there. And then after that, the more I produce, the more the costs go up. That's the green one. And so that's the variable part. And so this line here is showing you your fixed and your variable cost. And where they meet is my break-even point. Everything after that is profit. So I can see here I have to sell 600,000 units just to break even, to cover my costs. Anything I sell after that is profit, and the more I sell, the bigger that profit is. So we have to understand our costs, and then we have to understand what else is going on here. Our overall marketing strategy and objectives. So again, fitting in with the other of the 3 Ps. Organizational considerations, what I have, what are the priorities in my organization, what are the resources available. And then we want to talk about some of these other ones here too. So what's going on in the economy, the market for my product, the competitors for my product, the government regulations, and sometimes social concerns too, depending on what kind of product I'm making. If you sell something that is a necessity, you don't want to look like you are taking advantage of low-income people, that kind of thing. So let's talk about the market for our product and the demand for our product. So this is kind of on the other end here with the customers. How will customers respond to my price? Will they perceive that the value is there? because again, that's our ceiling at the top. That's the max people are willing to pay is what they value. How many buyers are there, and how sensitive are they to a change in price? That is called elasticity. Elasticity. There we go. And if you've had econ, if you've had micro-econ, you've talked about elasticity. We talked about that. So in general, the law of demand says if the price goes up, the quantity demanded will go down. So if we graph out demand like this, here's the quantity and here's the price. At a high price, the demand would be fairly low. At a lower price, the quantity demanded, and the amount that you sell will be higher. And so you connect the dots, and this is what your demand curve looks like. So the higher the price, this being 0, right? So the higher the price, the lower the quantity, like that. So we operate at this point or somewhere in between. And that's the law of demand. So we know if we increase our price, the amount we sell or the quantity demanded will go down. Now, how much will it go down? That's what the elasticity tells you. How much is your demand going to change when the price changes? And that's also very important to know. It depends on the type of product you sell. So here's the demand curve, and theirs is a little bit curved right here. But if it's very elastic, that means even a small change in price will have a big change in the quantity demanded. And if it's inelastic, even if I raise my price, I'm not going to sell that much. So I could raise my price by 10%, and maybe my sales would drop by 1%. And so the change in the quantity demand is smaller than the change in price. That's really, really important to know for you to be able to maximize your profit and your sales there. So again, this being the 0 point. If it's very elastic, that demand curve tends to be flat. If it's inelastic, it tends to be steep. And so you can see if I change my price here by this much, I get a fairly big change. If I do that same thing on this guy, it's kind of hard to write this small, I get a very small change in the quantity demanded, this being the quantity. So that same change in price over here makes a big change in the quantity demanded. Over here, it makes a small change. If you sell something that is a necessity, like gas or something like that, even if you raise your price, they'll buy a little bit less, but they're still going to buy it because they need it. If people don't have substitutes for that, it tends to be very inelastic. Whereas things that are luxury items or a big part of their budget, or there's a lot of substitutes, then people are very sensitive to a change in price. And if you increase your price, they'll just switch to something else. So it's very important to understand how people feel about your product and this type of what type of product it is in there and how sensitive they are to a price change. Because if you're inelastic, generally you can raise your revenue by increasing your price. And yeah, you'll lose a little bit of sales, but the revenue increase will be even more than the lost volume. Whereas if you have an elastic demand, you can probably raise your revenue by dropping your price, because the increased volume here will more than make up for the lower price. So it's really important to know that. The market that you're working in will depend a lot on the type of, and again, this we cover in microeconomics. Pure competition, these guys are what we call price takers. So they're working, there's no difference between their product and anybody else's. You usually see this in like agriculture or something like that, or even like the stock for a particular company. There's no difference. Like if you and I are both selling Microsoft stock, there's no difference between the share I'm selling and the share you're selling. So nobody would be willing to pay me more than you because there's no difference in the product. So these people just have to take whatever the market price is. The rest of these guys are, to some level, price setters. And if you can differentiate your product and convince people that it's worth more than the others, it has something of value, then you can charge a little bit higher price. So the extreme example would be a pure monopoly. There's only one seller, and they have a lot of control of the price. An oligopolistic competition, there's a couple big companies dominating the market. You generally see this in an industry where you have really high fixed costs. So like airlines or computer manufacturers or car manufacturers, soda, any of these industries that just have a couple big guys doing it. And then monopolistic competition is what a lot of firms fall under too. Most people fall under one, monopolistic competition or oligopoly. Monopolistic competition is called that because they're trying to create a monopoly within the competition. So they're similar products, but differentiated. Okay, so they're not identical like these guys are. These guys are identical. And so like restaurants or clothing stores or something like that, or hair salons, they're very similar in what they offer, but they're they're different. They try to create a little bit of difference, and the more difference that they can create, the more control they have over the price. So that pulls into that one too. The availability of substitutes. Again, if you're a monopoly, they don't have any substitutes, so this again affects that elasticity, or how much they will respond to a change in price. So if you're working in an oligopoly, your price very much depends on what your competitors are doing. They almost all stick very close together. So that kind of price matching thing that we saw earlier, you're more likely to see in an oligopoly. You do not want to get into a price war, because if one guy lowers the price, the rest of them will all lower their price, and they'll all just make less and sell the same amount they were selling before. So for these guys particularly, it depends a lot on what the other guys are doing. What's going on in the economy? Weak economies like a recession and high unemployment generally call for lower prices. However, if you spent years building up a high-quality reputation, recessions are fairly temporary. This last one was an unusually severe one, but most before that, when the average length of a recession was like 8 months, and then we're back out of it. So you'd hate to waste years of building up a high quality thing just to try and because really by the time you change your image, the recession's over, and now you've got a lower quality image, and it's going to be really, really difficult to change that. So keep in mind that these situations are temporary. That's why some companies have different brands, and so I have my high-end brand and my low-end brand, and I'll emphasize one during a recession and one during when the economy's better. It doesn't compromise the image of either one. Pricing decisions, there's all kinds of laws in there. Generally, they want to encourage competition, because that's almost always better for customers in terms of lower price, and protect customers, consumers, are generally what these laws are. Predatory pricing is kind of driving somebody else at that, so that would be anti-competitive. Bait and switch takes advantage of consumers. So these would be the two main goals of most of these laws, and I'm not going to make you kind of memorize laws, but there's lots of them. Channel pricing is if the manufacturer tells the retailer what they can charge, and that's not legal either. That's why you see like manufacturers suggested retail price, but they can't require their dealer to charge a certain price. That's what they call price maintenance, and that's not legal. Price discrimination is in some situations, price discrimination is illegal, charging different customers different products. If you can show that these customers behave differently, for instance, they have different elasticities, then that's legal. So, and again, like in retail, it's generally not going to be legal. I'm not going to go in and charge two different people two different prices for the same t-shirt. But if you look at any place that offers a senior citizen discount, that's price discrimination. I'm saying those people are more price sensitive, more elastic, and so I'm going to give them a lower price. Sorry, I got distracted here. Like at the movies, they charge a different price to children. Well, it costs the same thing to provide the service, right? It doesn't cost any less to show that movie to a kid than an adult. But if those groups of people act differently, then they might charge different prices. So that's price discrimination. But you do have to be careful that you can show there's an economic reason for it. Okay, so let's talk about some pricing strategies here. Hang on one second. Okay, so now that we have all of our factors to considered, it's time for us to come up with a pricing strategy. So the rest of this is really on specific strategies. And we'll talk about, this is coming up with a new product, the price for a new product first, and then we'll talk about changes to an existing product after that. So the main two things there are price skimming, whereas initially I'm the first one to market, so I price it really high at first, and then as competition comes in, I will have to lower my price based on the competition. But when I'm the first one there, I price it really high. I grab as much profit as I can, and then I'll lower my price later. You see this a lot, like with electronics. I think with the first one there, it's a really high price, and then as more alternatives come around, the price goes down. The opposite of that is penetration pricing, where I set my price low at first. Again, I'm kind of the first one of the market. I price myself low to try to grab as much, either they're already in there, or even if I'm the first one, I'm trying to grab as much market share as possible so that when the competition comes in, I'm already the household name. Or, like I said, there's already a lot of competition in there. So you go in, price it low, and try to grab as much market share from your competitors as you can. There's not one right way. It depends a lot on the type of market you're in and the demand for your product and all the other things that we've talked about. Everyday low prices is another one. We charge it low. We plan to stay low the whole time. They use that. At least they convince you that you're getting everyday low prices. That's one of the things. And then you kind of train people to look for that too. There's other ones. There's lots of different pricing strategies in here. Cost plus pricing is a markup. If you're a price setter, you can do that. This really is the most common one. Here's what it cost me to produce my product. I want a 20% profit, and then that's the price. Odd even pricing. I price it $10.99 instead of $11, or $9.99 instead of $10 because it sounds cheaper, kind of a thing. That's kind of these are both here part of PSY, psychological. Sorry, I can't spell. Pricing. Sometimes I price it high just to make people think they're getting a better offer. My husband always falls for that one because he says, you get what you pay for, that kind of thing. And so if this one's more expensive, it must be better. So that's prestige pricing. Both of those are kind of psychological things because this one, it's not really like gas. It's always, whatever, 99, 95, whatever, just to make you think that it's lower. If you are a price setter, you can use cost plus. If you're a price taker, you say, all right, I have to go with the market demand. So I start with that, and then I back into so I say, all right, here's the max I can charge. Here's the profit I want. All right, I need to find a way to make my costs fit into this. So you're actually not setting the price, you're setting your cost. What else do we have here? Captive pricing, when two things go together. So like razor blades or printer cartridges is a perfect example of that. Once you buy that printer, then you're locked into getting those printer prices. Product mix pricing, again, I have two different things in the same product line, and maybe I price one a little lower to encourage the sales of the other one. Two different charges. You get this one a lot. It's this, but then the shipping and handling is whatever, which is more than the shipping and handling. Sometimes that can be a little deceitful because you think you're getting this and then you don't realize that's what you're doing. I can break it down into smaller payments. Promotional pricing is a short term. That would be, just like kind of putting it on sale would be promotional pricing. Who else do we have here? Leader pricing, you'll see this a lot with, this would be a price leader or a loss leader. Sometimes you see it called a loss leader. I get you this just to get you in the store, and then I hope that you will, it doesn't have to be a loss, but it's a low price leader. Walmart and that kind of stuff will generally do that, or Sam's, to get you in, and then they hope that you make up for in volume what they lost in that one. Some of these others might be more business related. Sealed price bidding would be kind of a business to business thing. Online auctions can bid for that. Different types of auction-y things there. Those aren't going to be your more common one. Going rate, buyer pays the same regardless of where they get for it. So a lot of things are like that. Like I don't know, Apple products, or sometimes when the PS4 comes out, it doesn't matter where you go to get it, it's the same price. They're all the same. And then bundling is when I already did. Nope, I guess I didn't. I did captive. Bundling is when I mix them together at a lower price. So that would be like your Happy Meal, something like that. I put them together, and at least I think you get a lower price. Price adjustments. These are all business to business price adjustments. So raising or lowering my price after I've been on there. In business to business, it's common to see quantity discounts if you buy in larger purchases. Sometimes this tells you who pays for the shipping, the buyer or the seller pays for the shipping. So if it's FOB origin, that means the buyer is going to pay for it. If it's FOB destination, the seller is going to pay for it. What this indicates is when the buyer takes possession. So in this one, the buyer doesn't take possession until it reaches its destination. That means during shipping, the seller still owns it, and so the seller has to pay it. This one, as soon as it hits the shipping process, the buyer is the owner, and so the buyer has to pay this. You'll also see uniform delivered price. A lot of them are doing that. Same thing, same price regardless of where it's going. Bounce back. The seller gives the customer discounts or coupons. Again, you're going to more likely see that in business to business things, but sometimes you see it in consumers. If I am initiating price changes to consumers, some things to think about are how the buyer is going to react to the change. Are they going to see this as a if you lower the price, is this going to be a reduction in quality? If you raise the price, you're going to lose customers. Do they think you're taking advantage of them, or do they think you're adding value here? How are the competitors going to react? Is the competitor just going to do the same thing, like I said in the oligopoly, and then everybody makes less money, or are they going to retaliate in some other way? So anytime you change prices on any of these types of things, both your buyers and your competitors are going to react. So that's something else you need to consider. And so there's all the stuff in pricing, and that's it for 15 then.